Hello, and welcome to week 4, my lovely Madison High School folks. Sorry for the late video. The weekend and the morning got away from me. So I'm going to go ahead and get started so that I can kind of walk you through the week. So first off, let's just talk about housekeeping items. So here are the readings for this week. They're all fairly short, like especially the readings on like What's This Slave was the 4th of July and Ain't I a Woman. But I wanted to give you guys like a good smattering of different genres, well, specifically different voices during the Reconstruction era. And so when I get into the lecture, you'll see, but since this is American Reconstruction and progressivism, like this is running concurrently with what we did last week. So if you see, like the dates are pretty much the same. Um, However, very different types of writing, very different voices, very different issues. And so while they were going on and they were inextricably linked, like there are differences here. So I wanted you to see that there's lots of little like short pieces and the assignments for the week, thank you for your reading responses. I can't wait to read them. And there are three, but no reading responses. And there's a reason for that. So, what we're going to be doing this week is we're going to be doing a Sojourner Truth emulation speech. This is part of the writing workshop. And I will be mentioning something specifically about that speech and that assignment when we talk here in a minute. What I want to call your attention to is the muckraking editorial essay one. That's going to be our first big essay of the semester. And then, so the forum post number 3 is going to be on Reconstruction voices. And then, forum post here is muckraking topics, which is the subject of your editorial essay. So, I'm going to talk about these in a little bit more detail, like as you're going through the actual like week's tasks, but I wanted to show you that this is what a muckraking piece is. So this is a muckraking editorial. And when you get into the muckrakers a little bit, the focus of this is going to be to rake a concept to the muck, something that is an issue or a problem regarding our society and what do we need to do to expose it. So we're going to have rhetorical situations like our space cat consideration coming back from 112 when we did rhetorical situation. Um, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making an editorial that focuses in on making powerful social reform or powerful social movements. You can choose what the topic is. So if you want to, like, I had one person last year who focused in on Shein and fast fashion and the issues with fast fashion and its popularity, right? So it could be a big issue like that, or it could be something small, like in Madison County, like there are these particular people who are damaging the community. And that would be great too. So I've got more details on here as to the guidelines, but you're focusing in on the data, the research, the immersive narrative that is specifically like about exposing an issue from a personal perspective. Like if you've ever seen Super Size Me, it does this really well. Urgent and emotive tone and a call to action if appropriate. So the editorial will be roughly about 1,000 to 1,200 words, about 4 to 5 pages. And you're going to use 4 to 6 sources to guide this. And you're going to have to pre-approve your topic, which we will be getting into more detail over the next couple weeks. And then you're going to show mastery of everything we worked on in regards to audience awareness, appropriate voice and style, argumentation strategies, reading and writing rhetorically, and then composing a mature, well-informed like tone. So I've got your rubric here for you to look at. It's based on all the things that we talked about, but it also gives more details on editorial writing and what editorials have that's different in mode. So as you're going through and thinking of topics to explore for the week, really think about like any sort of topic that really makes you angry, or a topic that you feel like needs to be exposed and needs to be critiqued and fixed. And there are lots of topics here to help you, but let me know if you have any questions specifically about your topic. Okay, so going back to our course. Um, so that's what our muckraking topics is all about so that you can actually like delve into it. We're all going to talk about reconstruction with a forum post as you're developing your ideas for your editorial. And then we're just doing an emulation speech this week. So a lot of like creative changes in mode and tone this week to kind of match the progressivism that is this time period. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and present some information about Reconstruction literature um, and give you some information on muckraking. And here we go. Okay, so, got it. Okay, here we go. So the 13th Amendment was passed in 1865. Sorry, my screen wasn't sharing right. So it was in 1865, which is what we consider the Emancipation Proclamation, right? So that was the freeing of the slaves after the Civil War. And then we had our first Civil Rights Act of 1866. Now, in this Civil Rights Act, it was the first act that was really like establishing like equality among blacks and whites. However, it did not end up becoming equal, right? So in honor of Black History Month, like we have a lot of things to recognize, like voter restrictions. Black people were offered like the ability to vote, but there were poll taxes, literacy tests, grandfather clauses, white primaries, and a number of other things that kept Black people from being able to vote. And this was all during the time period we're talking about Reconstruction, right? And then you're probably well versed or are exposed to Jim Crow laws, which were laws that were put in place in order to segregate whites from blacks without it being actually in the law as segregation. And then a couple of other things to bring up, like Plessy v. Ferguson is the separate but equal doctrine, which was in 1896. And so this was when like people said, hey, we're equal, but like we're not going to be around each other because we're just too different. That's what Plessy v. Ferguson is. I'm going to skip that slide. So here are some of the Jim Crow laws were popular in this time period. So here are just a couple samples. So it shall be unlawful for a Negro and a white person to play together or in company of each other in a game of cards, dice, dominoes, or checkers. It shall be unlawful for any white prisoner to be handcuffed or otherwise chained or tied to a Negro prisoner. No colored barber shall serve as a barber to white women or girls. Marriages are void when one party is a white person and the other is possessed of 1/8 or more Negro, Japanese, or Chinese blood. Separate free schools shall be established for the education of children of African descent, and it shall be unlawful for any colored child to attend any white school or any white child to attend a colored school. And they go on. I have some more on the slide. Feel free to look through them, but it gives you a pretty good idea of during the Reconstruction era, after slavery was abolished, like everything was in social upheaval, right? And the what do we do with these freed slaves became a very unequal social distribution, right? So in Reconstruction literature of this time period, it was that focus of like political and economic rebuilding, and then we have the emergence of black voices in a way that had not really been they had not really been exposed to prior to this because they were enslaved. But you do see a lot of themes of like equality and education and racial identity coming out during Reconstruction lit. So, in Reconstruction literature, there is a lot of self-definition, especially about like who am I as a black woman or a black man in this world that is America, right? And some other themes are like, especially Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois focus on a lot of like education as the path to freedom, right? Um, and then there is a tension between that accommodation and resistance to white supremacy and white culture. So as we're moving through here, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because this video will take forever. But I do want you to know that like we're coming back to Space Cat. If you don't remember Space Cat, that was how we were able to read the rhetorical situation. So it stands for speaker, purpose, audience, context, exigence, choices, appeals, and tone. And so, as we're going through here, just remember the rhetorical situation. It's very important as we're going through these pieces. Is like, why is what they're saying being said? What are they saying? What is the effect of what they're saying? Who is listening to it? And how is it going to enact some sense of change? And so I encourage you to revisit this before you do your emulation speech or your muckraking piece of how to come back to that rhetorical situation and focusing on like the power of language or the power of oratory and like how does it land as a reflection of the speaker and the rhetorical situation. So the first piece I want to show you, and I'm going to take a second to actually let you watch this, um, is What to the Slave is the Fourth of July. Frederick Douglass is very well known for the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, and it was his narrative about being a freed slave and escaping. But he was an abolitionist speaker. And so what I want to show you real quick, and I hope the audio works on the video, but this is Frederick Douglass's descendants delivering his 4th of July speech, which is What to the Slave is the 4th of July.
Do I look there or look there? Okay. Okay. My name is Alexa Ann Watson, and I am the great-great-great-granddaughter of
Frederick Douglass is my
I am the great-great-great-granddaughter of Frederick Douglass.
I am the great-great-great-grandchild.
I've been counting on my fingers since I was like 5.
Whenever you're ready, here we go.
This is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom.
Fellow citizens, I shall not presume to dwell at length on the associations that cluster about this day. The simple story of it is that 76 years ago, the people of this country were British subjects.
Oppression makes a wise man mad. Your fathers were wise men, and if they did not go mad, they became restive under this treatment.
With brave men, there's always a remedy for oppression.
They succeeded, and today you reap the fruits of their success. The freedom gained is yours, and you, therefore, may properly celebrate this anniversary.
Fellow citizens, pardon me. Allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence?
Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us?
I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary.
Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common.
The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me.
The sunlight.
Okay, so I wanted to, I think you should watch the whole thing, but just for the interest of time, I just wanted you to hear some of those like snippets from What to the Slave is the 4th of July. But that was Frederick Douglass's descendants reading it, and it was a powerful critique of American hypocrisy, specifically about like the founding of America, right? So the 4th of July, equality among all men but Black men. So as you're looking through it, think about the rhetorical situation in which Douglass is writing and what are some of the choices that he's making that create that effect. So some things to pay attention to is this 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not me. And so those are some of the most impactful quotes. So pay attention to those as you read. Um, and then as we go through, like also just some of the things to pay attention to is that he's exposing the hypocrisy and he's challenging the reality, the American ideology of the time to focus in on the realities of what slavery was. Okay, the next piece that you're going to read is Ain't I a Woman by Sojourner Truth. On this slideshow, if you want to watch it, I have Kerry Washington reading it, which is a really cool depiction. But she specifically discusses intersectionality of race and gender. Um, but a couple of things that's really interesting is that if you follow this link, it kind of breaks down for you the difference between the original text that was written by or that was said by Sojourner Truth at the Women's Rights Convention, but it was later revised in 1863 by Frances Gage, a white woman, specifically changing the dialect and the diction in order to make Sojourner Truth sound more like a Jim Crow figure or like a more Southern figure, which is interesting because she had a Dutch upbringing. So as you're paying attention to that, like really think about like the way in which like the speech is written versus the way that it was originally delivered and why a white person would revise that later and what kind of impact it has on the rhetoric. And so here's the video. I'm not going to play this one because this video is going to be crazy long, but you should totally watch it. It's very interesting and it's pretty short. But in the speech, she repeats "Ain't I a Woman" over time. She uses personal anecdotes to counter stereotypes about Black people, and then she focuses in on the strength of Black women. And our last couple pieces of specifically like restoration literature, W.E.B. Du Bois, The Souls of Black Folk, published in 1903. He and Booker T. Washington were contemporaries, but he focused on the concept of double consciousness, or the idea that Black people occupy Black spaces, but then they must also learn how to look through the veil to occupy white spaces and be able to behave as they should in white society. So just keeping that in mind is like the idea of the double consciousness is something that was very famous for Du Bois, but it's a sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others. And he also talked about like pulling up the black folks from poverty and from ignorance and accelerating scholarship in order to create this idea of like solidarity and social movement. Now, Booker T. Washington, he was a contemporary, but he and Du Bois had different ideologies. He focused more on self-reliance and vocational education, flashback to transcendentalism. And he wanted gradual improvement of race relations by working through the white system and making gradual change. And so a lot of things about them are very different about Black advancement. So Washington focused on accommodating oneself to white society, and Du Bois was specifically like bringing up Black people through education and political action. But these were some of the foundations for the modern day civil rights movement and shaped discussion on like race and education and economic empowerment. I've also got some interesting questions here. These are as part of your forum discussion post. So, Ain't I a Woman, specifically about the intersectionality, What to the Slave is the 4th of July, Souls of Black Folk, and Up from Slavery. So these are the discussion questions for the week. All right. So the last concept of this time period that I really wanted to get into is muckraking. And so this is going to be the concept that you're going to use as the foundation for your speech. I'm sorry, not your speech, your editorial. But muckraking was investigative journalism that exposed social ills. It came out of the progressive era and it aimed to drive social and political reform, focused on mass media, newspaper, journalism. It's a lot of what sparked modern investigative journalism. And it really focused in on literature's power to affect change. Ida B. Wells, who was a Black woman, was one of the most impactful muckrakers of the time. She did a lot of exposure of lynch laws in Virginia. um, and to specifically change the laws of how Black people were being treated and then lynched. Then you also have, like, moving completely away from race relations, you also have Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, but it was published in 1906. It was serialized, but it was a very specific narrative focused on extensive research of unsanitary conditions in Chicago's meatpacking industry. It highlighted the exploitation of immigrant workers. It led to the passage of the Pure Food and Drug Act and Meal Inspection Act, but his intention was to expose worker exploitation, and the public reaction was focused on food safety, and so a lot of, like, the FDA, other things came out of this. Um, but he says, "I aimed at the public's heart, and by accident, I hit it in the stomach." Then the Carl Sandburg selections that you're gonna read, and if you ever have a chance to go to the Carl Sandburg home out in Flat Rock, it is beautiful, and I do love petting the baby goat. But Carl Sandburg wrote some protest poetry, muckraking poetry during this time period in the Chicago poems. And he depicted harsh realities of urban industrial life. Was inspired by some of Walt Whitman's work and colloquial language to expose, like, the working, um, lower class, blue collar workers' conditions in Chicago. Um, and so, on that note, I'm going to stop talking. I think that I hit all the high points. So, as you guys are moving through this week and you're thinking about your muckraking topics and you're thinking about how you want to write an emulation speech, and if as you're reading and discussing the Reconstruction, really think about, like, social reform here. So this is a very specific time period. And once Reconstruction happened, we also have the Industrial Revolution, and then we have Progressive Era. We have a lot of change. Um, and that change really started fueling a lot of our advancements for the 20th century. So just kind of be thinking about how these people use language in order to enact social change. And on that note, I hope everybody has an amazing week. Bye bye now.